The air in the living room felt colder than the November rain beating against the windows of our modest home on Willow Lane. I remember the exact tilt of the antique grandfather clock in the corner, 2 p.m. 8 years of marriage, 8 years building a life that wasn't perfect but was undeniably ours, now distilled down to a single shattering moment. Serafina Thorne, the woman who had cried tears of joy and swore eternal commitment, sat across from me, her expression utterly vacant, flanked by her parents, Wallace and Alara Sterling. The paper she pushed across the mahogany coffee table was thin, rustling like dry leaves. It wasn't a lottery ticket, though that $12 million prize was the invisible, suffocating presence in the room. It was a formal separation notice. "We need to talk about our situation," Serafina whispered, her voice too formal, too practiced, echoing her father's earlier clearing of his throat. Then, the words had hit me like a physical blow. "Arthur, I think we should separate. This money, it's mine." I picked the numbers. I could feel the intricate, expensive legal framework they had prepared for years, the one meant to keep me out, snapping shut around my future. My name is Arthur Thorne. I am 45 years old, and until 10 months ago, I believed I had mastered the messy complexity of life. I maintained a comfortable, reliable existence as a construction project manager in Palm Harbor, California, earning a stable $85,000 annually. It was enough to keep my wife, Serafina, and me secure in our 3-bedroom house nestled on Willow Lane in Cypress Cove. Nothing luxurious, but was ours. Serafina and I had been married for 8 years. She was striking, fiercely ambitious, and crucially, she originated from serious wealth. The kind of legacy finance in old California that constructs sprawling, exclusive gated communities and pristine golf clubs. Her family, the Sterlings, made it abundantly clear that I, a man who earned his living through steel, concrete, and honest labor, was not worthy of their daughter. They ensured this message was reinforced with chilling clarity when they demanded I sign a prenuptial agreement before our December 2016 wedding. "It's purely to safeguard the family holdings, Arthur," Wallace Sterling, her father, had stated in his downtown legal office. His voice was smooth, patronizing, and devoid of warmth. Nothing personal, just sound business practice. I signed it almost reflexively. Love, especially young, consuming love, makes a person overlook the finer print. I was completely devoted to Serafina. The prenuptial agreement seemed simple enough on the surface. Their family assets remained theirs, my meager assets remained mine, and anything we acquired collectively during the marriage would be categorized as marital property. Simple, clean, and easily dismissed as irrelevant to our modest future. For 8 years, our marriage was solid. We weren't wealthy by Sterling standards, but we enjoyed genuine happiness. Serafina held a part-time position at a renowned art gallery downtown. She earned about $26,000 per year, more for the pursuit of passion than out of any real financial necessity. We often discussed having children someday, or perhaps upgrading to a slightly larger home. The routine, comforting conversations of a committed married couple. Then, a Tuesday morning in October 2024 arrived, and the entire structure of our life collapsed. Serafina had obsessively played the same lottery numbers for years. They were a mix of family birthdays and significant anniversaries. She would often joke, "One day, Arthur, these numbers are going to transform us into millionaires." That Tuesday they did. The jackpot was $12 million. After federal taxes, and with California taxes applied, though the source specifies Florida tax rules, following the spirit of the wind, the net amount was colossal, roughly $8.1 million. I recall vividly staring at the winning ticket that evening in our kitchen, struggling to accept the reality before my eyes. Serafina was hysterical, shouting, leaping, and immediately dialing her parents on her mobile phone. "We're rich, Arthur," she screamed, enveloping me in a frantic hug. "We are truly, definitively rich." For a fleeting 10 minutes, I genuinely believed all our shared dreams had materialized. That same night, the entire Sterling clan descended upon our house on Willow Lane. Wallace and Alara Sterling were there, along with Serafina's brother, Gregory, and even her highly critical Aunt Beatrice, who usually pretended I was invisible. They celebrated with excessive champagne, their voices loud with new, lavish plans. But beneath the surface of the celebration, an unsettling change had taken root. The way they looked at me had subtly shifted. It was minuscule at first, quick, secretive side glances. Conversations would abruptly halt the moment I entered a room. Serafina also seemed different, adopting a noticeable distance and a chilling coldness. Over the following days, this emotional gap widened. Serafina began engaging in long, hushed, and private phone conversations with her family. She would leave the room deliberately when I approached, speaking in guarded tones. When I eventually tried to discuss our shared plans with a massive sum, she grew immediately evasive. "We must be strategic about this, Arthur," she insisted. "My father has connections, elite financial advisors. We need to shield our windfall." 3 weeks after securing the win, on November 2nd, the inevitable confrontation arrived. Serafina summoned me to the living room. The presence of Wallace and Alara Sterling should have functioned as the most obvious, glaring red flag. "Arthur," Serafina began, her voice strained and unnaturally formal, "we need to address our financial situation." Wallace Sterling cleared his throat, leaning forward. "Son, this lottery would fundamentally alter circumstances. Serafina's windfall necessitates appropriate protection." "Our windfall," I calmly corrected. "We are married. What belongs to her belongs to me, and vice versa." A thick silence descended upon the room. Alara Sterling exchanged a significant glance with her husband. Gregory Sterling smirked from his position near the window. "Actually, Arthur," Wallace continued, the patience in his voice strained, "that is not precisely the operational reality here. Lottery winnings are often legally designated as personal property in these situations, especially when—" "Arthur," Serafina cut in, finally speaking the words they had carefully rehearsed, "I believe we should separate for a period of time. This money, it's mine. I want it." She looked away from me. I picked the numbers myself. I felt as though I had been physically assaulted. "What exactly are you suggesting, Serafina?" "I'm initiating divorce proceedings," she replied, still avoiding my gaze. "And I require you to move out today." Wallace Sterling pressed his advantage, leaning closer. "The prenuptial agreement you willingly sign protects both parties, Arthur. Serafina's lottery win is classified as her separate property. You are not legally entitled to any part of it. 8 years of committed marriage, and they were disposing of me like household refused the instant serious money appeared." "I understand," I stated quietly. Standing up, "I'll pack my possessions." Serafina looked visibly relieved. Her family appeared satisfied, confident I was surrendering without a fight. They had no inkling of the catastrophic legal error they had just engineered. That evening, I relocated to the Baby Motel on Ocean Boulevard, paying $115 per night for a sterile room. Instead of wallowing in the justifiable despair they expected, I acted in a way they surely hadn't anticipated. I secured legal representation. I didn't choose a local general practitioner. I called Marcus Vance, widely regarded as one of the most effective, aggressive divorce attorneys in Palm Harbor. I had heard about his success from former colleagues who had navigated contentious splits. His consultation fee was $600. It was, without a doubt, the wisest expenditure I have ever made. "Mr. Thorne," Vance inquired during our meeting the following morning in his office, "tell me about this prenuptial agreement." I handed over the copy I had meticulously filed away. Vance scrutinized it closely, his expression transforming into one of deep interest with every page he turned. "This is genuinely fascinating," he finally pronounced. "Your in-law's attorney was excessively thorough, almost too thorough." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding in anticipation. Vance directed my attention to a specific provision on page 3, section 4.2. He read it aloud. "Right here, it states that any assets, prizes, or winnings acquired during the marriage shall be considered marital property subject to equitable distribution upon divorce." I felt a dizzying mix of relief and confusion, but they insisted lottery winnings are personal property in California. In a standard situation, lottery tickets purchased with marital funds during a marriage are indeed defined as marital property, Vance explained. But even if Serafina had used entirely separate funds, this specific prenup explicitly overrides the protection the Sterlings were banking on. Vance offered a slow, cold smile. Mr. Thorne, your wealthy in-laws just accidentally handed you the means to financial sovereignty. A deep, cold sense of satisfaction settled in my chest. So, according to the document they made me sign, I am entitled to half? Potentially, yes, Vance confirmed. However, we must proceed with calculated strategy. They will fight this relentlessly, and they possess limitless resources. My retainer is $18,000. I charged a retainer to my credit card and took a loan against my 401k retirement fund. It was the most crucial investment of my life. Over the subsequent 2 weeks, Serafina and the Sterling family affirmed their ruthless intentions. They retained the most costly, aggressive divorce lawyer in Palm Harbor, a notorious legal shark named Dorian Finch, whose specialty was protecting the fortunes of ultra-wealthy clients. His hourly rate was a staggering $950. Finch immediately began sending me aggressively worded letters, demanding I drop all claims to the lottery winnings. He argued vehemently that because Serafina personally selected the numbers and purchased the ticket, the winnings constituted her separate property, regardless of the prenup. They completely misjudged my resolve. They saw a working-class man who would simply capitulate and accept whatever financial scraps they condescended to offer. They were fundamentally wrong. Vance and I worked methodically through November and December. Our mission was simple: document every relevant financial transaction. We meticulously recorded precisely when the winning ticket was purchased, which bank account the money originated from, and critically, the fact that Serafina had been habitually utilizing our joint Pacific Trust checking account to purchase lottery tickets for several years. The most powerful breakthrough, however, arrived when Vance uncovered the exquisite truth embedded within California state family law, mirroring the protective statute in Florida. Arthur, Vance announced during a late December strategy session, state statute is very clear regarding lottery winnings acquired during a marriage. Unless there is a specific, explicitly worded agreement stating otherwise, they are presumed to be marital assets. But didn't the prenup? Vance grinned, finishing my thought. That is the magnificent irony. The very prenuptial agreement your in-laws compelled you to sign actually strengthens your claim. They were so pathologically worried about protecting their existing generational wealth that they specifically included language about any prizes or winnings being categorized as marital property. In their paranoid haste, they accidentally gifted away rights to future, unforeseen windfalls. Meanwhile, Serafina was living a life of blatant, unbridled extravagance. In November, she purchased a brand-new Genesis GV80 SUV for approximately $95,000. She acquired numerous designer clothing collections and placed a substantial deposit of $800,000 on a luxury Bayside Heights penthouse in a desirable seaside community. Her social media feeds were overflowing with photographs taken at opulent restaurants like the Golden Tusk and during extravagant, high-end shopping excursions at the Grand Galleria. She was spending our marital money with reckless, accelerated abandon. Crucially, her social media was meticulously documenting every single purchase, providing us with a timeline of her spending before the divorce was filed. The formal divorce proceedings commenced in earnest in January 2025. Finch, Serafina's counsel, initiated the action aggressively. He filed a flurry of motions intended to dismiss my claims entirely, brazenly arguing that I was nothing more than a gold digger attempting to manipulate a legal loophole. During our initial court appearance at the Harborview Justice Center on January 15th, Finch exuded palpable arrogance. He strutted around the courtroom in a custom $3,000 charcoal gray suit, making loud, snide remarks about opportunistic spouses to anyone within earshot. Your Honor, Finch proclaimed to Judge Elena Rhodes, known for her 18 years of rigorous fairness on a family court bench. Mr. Thorne is shamelessly attempting to claim half of winnings that his estranged wife earned solely through her own luck and her personal intuition. The lottery ticket was purchased entirely with Mrs. Thorne's personal funds, utilizing numbers derived from her family's significant dates. This is unequivocally separate property. Vance rose slowly for our counterargument. Your Honor, the law is unambiguous on this matter. But far more critical is the prenuptial agreement that Mr. Finch's clients themselves insisted upon. That document explicitly states that any prizes or winnings acquired during the marriage are marital property. Finch scoffed audibly. That particular clause was intended merely to cover incidental prizes, minor casino winnings or neighborhood raffle jackpots, not a spectacular $12 million lottery jackpot. The document states, any prizes or winnings, Your Honor, Vance calmly countered. It does not specify or impose a monetary limit. Judge Rhodes, known for thoroughness, requested comprehensive copies of all documentation. The initial hearing was adjourned for a fortnight, allowing her ample time for careful review. I later learned through mutual acquaintances that Serafina was incandescent with rage. She was reportedly screaming at Wallace and Alara Sterling, viciously blaming them for the very language they had demanded be included in the prenup. The Sterling family was beginning to experience genuine panic. They attempted to settle outside of court in early February. Wallace Sterling called me directly on my cell phone, a gesture he had never once made in our 8 years of marriage. Arthur, let's be reasonable, he proposed. We will immediately offer you $1.2 million to simply walk away, completely clean. That is a sum far exceeding anything you have ever earned. I'll consider your offer, I replied, though my decision was already irrevocably made. 2 days later, Serafina herself arrived at my temporary room at the Bayview Motel. She looked noticeably different, haggard, stressed. The relentless partying and pressure were clearly taking their toll. Arthur, please, she begged, tears welling up. We can resolve this amicably. I was terrified, okay? The sheer amount of money. It completely overwhelmed me. My family got into my head. Scared of what, Serafina? I asked. Scared of sharing our good fortune? I will give you $3.2 million, she said desperately. $3.2 million, Arthur. We can both use that to start fresh lives. I looked at the woman who had been my wife for 8 years, the woman I had once loved unconditionally. I felt nothing but a profound sense of pity. It was never about the money, Serafina, I told her softly. It was always about respect. She left shortly after, crying. I nearly felt sorry for her. Nearly. The discovery phase that spanned February and March illuminated precisely how badly the Sterlings and Finch had miscalculated. Vance subpoenaed every single one of Serafina's financial records. These documents showed irrefutably that she had been using our joint Pacific Trust account to purchase lottery tickets for many years. We possessed documentation extending back to 2019, establishing this as a consistent pattern of marital spending. Even more damaging to their case was Finch's advice to Serafina regarding the handling of the funds. Instead of holding the winnings strictly separate, she had spent the money freely, actively mixing it with other marital funds. In legal terminology, she had commingled the asset, a factor that dramatically strengthened our legal claim. But the true, definitive nail in the coffin emerged when Vance discovered a critical procedural error committed by Finch. In his reckless haste to file preliminary motions back in November, Finch had actually acknowledged in court documents that the lottery ticket was purchased during the marriage with marital funds. He just annihilated his own case, Arthur. Vance told me, barely managing to contain his triumphant glee. Finch is so accustomed to aggressively bullying less wealthy opponents into instant settlements that he became careless and sloppy. The final hearing was firmly scheduled for April 18, 2025. As the date approached, the sheer desperation of the Sterling family became tragically obvious. They employed a private investigator to relentlessly search for any compromising information on me. They found absolutely nothing. I had always lived an honest, clean life. They subsequently attempted to claim I had been emotionally abusive, hoping this fabrication would minimize my settlement amount. Serafina gave a formal deposition, claiming I had been manipulative and overly controlling. The fundamental problem was a complete lack of evidence. No police reports, no medical documentation, no supporting witnesses. It was pure, transparent fabrication. Vance systematically demolished their claims using documented phone records that demonstrated Serafina had consistently made all the major financial decisions during our marriage. Bank statements clearly proved I had never restricted her access to funds. Even her own social media posts showed her living happily and freely throughout our time together. 3 days before the hearing, Finch presented one final, desperate settlement offer for $0.5 million. It is a highly competitive offer, Arthur, Vance cautiously advised. Taking this to a final trial always involves risk, even with the strength of our position. I shook my head decisively. This isn't about maximizing the money, Marcus. This is about securing justice. The night before the courtroom hearing, I couldn't sleep in my small motel room. I kept reflecting on how this entire ordeal had begun, with a prenup designed specifically to shield their precious family money from me. The irony was almost overwhelming. Their own rampant greed and chronic paranoia had inadvertently created the weapon that would ultimately lead to their defeat. The Sterling family had spent their entire existence condescendingly looking down on individuals like me, working-class people who earned their money through consistent, honest effort. They were convinced that wealth made them inherently superior, intellectually sharper, and intrinsically more deserving. The following day, they would learn a devastating lesson. April 18 arrived, a morning marked by gray, thick humidity, typical California spring weather. I wore my finest suit, a charcoal gray custom black label suit I had purchased for our wedding 8 years prior. The inherent irony of the attire was not lost on me. The Harborview Justice Center was packed. Word of the high-profile case had leaked, and local news crews were stationed outside. Construction worker fights for lottery millions had become a sensational human interest story. Serafina sat rigidly with her family on one side of the courtroom, looking pale and deeply nervous. Finch whispered urgently into her ear, undoubtedly prepping her for the devastating events to come. Judge Rhodes took her seat precisely at 9 a.m. "We are here for the matter of Thorne versus Thorne, case number 2025-DR00002840. Mr. Finch, you may present your opening argument." Finch stood with a surface confidence, but I clearly noticed his hands trembling slightly. "Your Honor, this case is fundamentally about a vindictive husband attempting to steal money he had no personal part in earning. Mrs. Thorne selected those winning lottery numbers, purchased a ticket herself, and won the prize purely through her own singular actions." Vance remained seated, calmly scribbling notes on his yellow legal pad. He appeared utterly relaxed. Finch continued his argument for a full 20 minutes, asserting that lottery winnings were automatically personal property, that the prenup was never intended to apply to such unforeseeable windfalls, and that I was simply a gold digger. When he concluded, Judge Rhodes turned to Vance. "Mr. Vance, your opening statement." Vance stood slowly. "Your Honor, this case is remarkably simple. We possess a prenuptial agreement, signed by both involved parties in December 2016, that explicitly declares that any prizes or winnings acquired during marriage are marital property. We possess California state law that firmly supports this position. And most critically, we have irrefutable documentation proving the winning lottery ticket was purchased with marital funds during the marriage." He paused, looking directly at Finch. "The defense is requesting this court to simply ignore their own mutually executed contract because they do not approve of the eventual outcome. The evidence phase proved devastating to Serafina's defense." Vance presented bank records showing the years-long pattern of lottery ticket purchases made from our joint Pacific Trust account. He demonstrated precisely how Serafina had actively commingled the massive lottery winnings with other marital assets. He even produced the paper receipt from the Quick Stop Market on Peninsula Road, where she purchased a winning ticket on October 8, 2024, paid for using our joint debit card at 3:47 p.m. Finch's subsequent cross-examination was staggeringly weak. He desperately attempted to argue that Serafina had intended to keep the winnings strictly separate, but Vance countered that intention is irrelevant when the money has already been irrevocably mixed. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Vance legally challenged Finch's entire strategy by reading directly from Finch's own notarized court filings. "Mr. Finch, in your preliminary motion filed and dated November 18, 2024, you stated, and I quote, 'The lottery ticket in question was purchased during the marriage with funds from a marital estate.' Do you recall submitting that official statement?" Finch's face went white. That was a misstatement. A misstatement. Vance pressed. That you sign and file with this court under penalty of perjury? Yes or no? Judge Rhodes leaned forward sharply. Mr. Finch, are you informing this court that you file false documents? No, Your Honor. I simply misspoke in the document. I intended to state. Vance interrupted forcefully. Your Honor, Mr. Finch's own official filings robustly support our position. He has formally acknowledged that marital funds were explicitly used to purchase the winning ticket. The Sterling family looked physically ill. Wallace was visibly sweating through his expensive suit. Ilera continuously shook her head in sheer disbelief. Serafina took the stand to offer testimony on her own behalf. Finch had coached her carefully, but she was visibly rattled. Mrs. Thorne, Vance began his cross-examination. You just testified under oath that you always intended to maintain any lottery winnings as separate property. Is that correct? Yes, she stammered. Then why did you proceed to deposit the entire $7.2 million into your personal checking account at Bank of America, an account which you routinely use to pay joint marital expenses? Serafina stammered. I needed a place to put it. You possess a separate account at Coastal Fidelity Bank, correct? An account your husband has never had access to. Yes. And that specific account contained over $63,000 at the time of the deposit, correct? Yes, she admitted. So, you possess an immediate, available location to keep the money strictly separate, but you chose not to. Instead, you deliberately mixed it with marital funds and commenced spending it freely. Is that an accurate summary? Serafina looked desperately at Finch, but he was powerless to assist her. I guess so. Vance then produced her purchase agreement for the Genesis GV80. You purchased this vehicle on November 15th, 2024, precisely 5 days after depositing the lottery winnings, correct? Yes. For $95,000, using lottery money. Yes. Did you consult with your husband about this major financial purchase? We were separated, she argued. Ma'am, you did not formally file for divorce until November 20th, 2024. You were still legally married when you executed this purchase. So I must ask again, did you discuss this significant purchase with Arthur Thorne? No, she conceded. Judge Rhodes called a recess for lunch at 12:30 p.m. In the hallway, Wallace Sterling made one final attempt. Arthur, this is madness. We will appeal any decision she makes. This could consume years. That is your prerogative, Wallace. I replied calmly, but I have ample time and a highly competent lawyer. The afternoon session was mercifully brief. Judge Rhodes had already reached a decision. I have thoroughly reviewed all presented evidence and applicable law. She began at 2:15 p.m. The prenuptial agreement, signed in December 2016, is clear and entirely unambiguous. Section 4.2 explicitly states that any prizes or winnings acquired during marriage are marital property. State Statute 61.075 further supports this interpretation. Furthermore, the defendant's actions in commingling the lottery winnings with marital assets unequivocally demonstrates her own implied recognition that these substantial funds were not, in fact, separate property. Serafina began to weep, and Ilera grabbed her hand tightly. Therefore, Judge Rhodes concluded, I am awarding Mr. Thorne 50% of the net lottery winnings, totaling $4.05 million. Mrs. Thorne, you are mandated to liquidate necessary assets within 60 days to meet this legal obligation. The gavel struck the wood with a loud, profoundly satisfying thud at 2:22 p.m. Outside the courthouse, reporters aggressively shouted questions. I ignored them all, save for one journalist who asked, Mr. Thorne, how do you feel about this victory? I paused, thinking about the journey. Justice, I stated clearly, always feels good. 2 months later, in June 2025, I utilized a portion of my settlement to purchase a small, reputable construction company from a contractor who was retiring. Today, Thorne and Associates Builders employs 38 people and focuses specifically on constructing affordable housing developments throughout Palm Harbor and Central California. Serafina was forced to sell the Genesis GV80, forfeit the deposit on her Bayside Heights penthouse, and liquidate most of her excessive designer purchases to satisfy the court's judgment. Last I received word, she was working in her father's real estate office in Seaside Estates, earning a salary of $42,000 annually. The Sterling family never spoke to me again, which was a welcome relief. They had exposed their true nature the moment they believed they could discard me like worthless refuse. Sometimes, the most fulfilling revenge is not revenge at all. Sometimes, it is simply allowing people to fully confront the painful consequences of their own ingrained greed and profound stupidity. They painstakingly crafted the legal weapon that ultimately annihilated them. I simply possessed the dignity and fortitude to use it.